The alarms screamed through the command center of the Federation flagship, their high-pitched wails mixing with the frantic voices of officers shouting orders in a dozen different languages. Admiral Kethvar pressed his four-fingered hands against his temples, trying to block out the chaos as he stared at the tactical display floating before him. The red dots representing Vexhai ships outnumbered the blue Federation markers by nearly 10 to 1. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Meridian Defense Fleet," reported Commander Zethli, her voice cracking with barely controlled panic. "The entire Kepler 186 system has gone dark." Kethvar's scaled skin rippled with the color changes that betrayed his species' emotional state. 3 entire star systems. Gone. Billions of lives consumed by the endless hunger of the swarm. In his 200 years of military service, he had never witnessed anything like this. The Vexhai had appeared at the galaxy's edge 18 months ago, bursting from unknown space with a ferocity that caught the entire Federation off guard. They fought unlike anything the civilized galaxy had ever encountered. Where Federation forces used precision energy weapons and coordinated fleet movements, the Vexhai threw themselves forward in endless waves of living ships that seemed to breed faster than they could be destroyed. "Admiral, incoming transmission." From the Altarian High Command, called out Communications Officer Telnara from her station. The young officer's tentacles trembled as she worked her controls. "Priority 1, sir." The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of Grand Admiral Quindar, the Federation's highest-ranking military officer. The ancient Altarians' usually composed features showed deep lines of stress. "Kethvar, what's your status?" Quindar asked without preamble. "We're falling back to the Kepler 442 system, sir. The swarm has broken through our defensive lines at 3 separate points. Our losses are severe." Kethvar paused, then added the words that tasted like poison in his mouth. "I recommend we begin evacuating core Federation worlds." Quindar's image flickered with static as another explosion shook the flagship. "Evacuation is not an option, Admiral. The Federation Council has made that clear. We stand and fight." "With what, sir?" Kethvar couldn't keep the desperation from his voice. "We've lost 60% of our fleet strength. The Vexhai adapt to our weapons faster than we can develop new ones. They don't fear death like civilized beings do. They welcome it." The transmission fell silent for a long moment. Around the command center, officers continued their work, but Kethvar could feel their attention focused on the conversation. Everyone knew they were losing this war. "There may be another option," Quindar said finally. "The Science Council has completed their analysis of the species discovered in Sector 7G. The humans." Kethvar's translator implant took a moment to process the unfamiliar word. "Sir, our initial contact reports classified them as a primitive species. They've barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Primitive, yes, but they evolved on a world our xenobiologists have classified as Class 3. A death world, Kethvar. The kind of planet that kills most Federation species within hours." The Admiral felt his skin shift to deeper shades of blue, a sign of confusion among his people. "I don't understand, sir. How does their world's hostility help us against the swarm?" "Think about it, Admiral. Every species in the Federation evolved on worlds where cooperation and intelligence were the keys to survival. We developed civilization because we needed to work together to thrive. But humans come from a world that tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. They didn't develop civilization to thrive. They developed it despite their world's attempts to destroy them." Kethvar processed this information while explosions continued to light up the space around his ship. The Vexhai were pressing their attack, pushing deeper into Federation territory with each passing hour. "Sir, even if these humans possess unusual survival traits, they're only one species. We need armies, not anthropological curiosities. The Science Council believes their world has shaped them in ways we don't fully understand. Their preliminary reports suggest humans have physical and psychological adaptations that might make them uniquely suited for warfare against the swarm. They seem to possess a capacity for violence that civilized species have evolved away from." The flagship shuddered as another Vexhai bioweapon struck their shields. Through the viewports, Kethvar could see the organic shapes of enemy vessels closing in, their hulls pulsing with disgusting life. How many soldiers can they provide? He asked. Their initial response suggests a force of approximately 2,000 troops. Not large by our standards, but the Council believes quality may be more important than quantity in this case. 2,000. Kethavar's tactical computer estimated they needed at least 50,000 fresh troops to have any chance of holding the Kepler 442 system. The human offer seemed almost insulting. Sir, with respect, 2,000 primitive soldiers won't change the course of this war. Perhaps not, Quindar admitted. But we're running out of options, Admiral. The Federation Council has authorized me to accept any assistance offered. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? If the humans fail, we're no worse off than we are now. The transmission ended, leaving Kethavar alone with his doubts and the continuing sounds of battle. He looked around the command center at his officers, all of them young and dedicated servants of the Federation. Most of them would be dead within the week if the current pace of losses continued. Commander Zethalai, he called out, send a message to the human homeworld. Tell them we accept their offer of military assistance. And relay our tactical data on the Vexhai. If they're going to die for the Federation, they deserve to know what they're facing. As his communications officer began composing the message, Kethavar turned back to the tactical display. The red dots continued to multiply, spreading like a cancer across the galaxy's edge. Soon they would reach the Federation's core worlds, and then there would be nowhere left to run. Perhaps the humans would prove more capable than their primitive technology suggested. Perhaps their death world had forged them into something stronger than civilized beings could imagine. Or perhaps they would simply die alongside the rest of the galaxy, another species consumed by the endless hunger of the swarm. Either way, Kethavar thought as he watched the battle rage outside his ship, they would learn soon enough what kind of reinforcements the Federation had called for. General Lisa Murphy stood in the war room deep beneath the Martian surface, her steel-gray eyes scanning the alien transmission for the third time. The holographic display showed creatures that looked like a nightmare fusion of insect and machine, their bioships pulsing with organic weaponry that defied human understanding. Around the table, her senior staff waited in silence. So, let me understand this correctly, she said, setting down the data pad. These Federation aliens want us to throw ourselves at an enemy that has already wiped out half their military. An enemy that breeds faster than it can be killed and fights with living weapons. She looked around the room. And they're asking us because we come from what they consider a death world. Colonel Jake Harrison leaned forward in his chair. The scars on his face told the story of 20 years fighting in Earth's worst conflicts. General, it sounds like they want cannon fodder. They've run out of their own people to throw at this swarm, so now they want ours. That's exactly what it sounds like, agreed Major Kate Sullivan, the intelligence officer. But look at these tactical reports. The Federation has been fighting this war for 18 months and they're losing badly. If this swarm breaks through their lines, they'll eventually reach human space. Captain Amy Rodriguez studied the alien battle footage on her personal display. She had led special operations teams through the radioactive ruins of Chicago and the poison swamps of what used to be Florida. The Federation's fighting style looked clean and precise compared to the brutal urban warfare she knew. Their tactics are all wrong, she said quietly. They're fighting like this is a normal war. Energy weapons, shield walls, coordinated fleet movements. But look at these Vexhai. They don't fight like soldiers. They fight like animals. Harrison nodded. Animals that happen to have faster-than-light travel and weapons that can crack planets. The Federation says they've never encountered anything like this before. Of course they haven't, Rodriguez replied. Look at their casualty reports. They pull back when losses reach 10%. They retreat when their equipment gets damaged. They've never had to fight a war where losing means extinction. General Murphy had been listening to the exchange with growing interest. She pulled up Earth's military history on the main display, showing conflict zones from the Australian wastelands to the Siberian ice wars. Colonel Harrison, how many of your men have combat experience in hostile environments? All of them, General. The 7th Expeditionary has been deployed in every major conflict zone on Earth for the past 5 years. Desert warfare, Arctic operations, urban combat in contaminated zones. We've fought in places where the environment was trying to kill us just as hard as the enemy was. And how do we typically handle enemies that outnumber us? Harrison's scarred face split into a grim smile. We don't fight fair, General. We use every advantage we can get. Psychological warfare, environmental hazards, asymmetric tactics. Whatever it takes to win. Murphy turned to Major Sullivan. What's your assessment of Federation military doctrine? They fight like they have unlimited resources and time, General. Their weapons are more advanced than ours, but they seem to rely on technological superiority rather than tactical innovation. Based on these reports, they've been trying to outgun the swarm rather than outthink them. And it's not working, Murphy observed. She activated the communication system. Get me a direct link to Admiral Chen at Pacific Fleet Command. It's time to make a decision. The holographic projector flickered to life, showing the image of Admiral Patricia Chen aboard her flagship orbiting Earth. The two women had served together during the Australian campaigns, back when the continent was still burning from the ecological disasters of the 2080s. Lisa, I've been reviewing the alien transmission, Chen said without preamble. This is a hell of a thing they're asking. What do you think, Pat? Is this a suicide mission or an opportunity? Chen paused, considering her words carefully. Both, probably. But if these Vex-Hi are half as dangerous as the reports suggest, we can't afford to let them win. A species that consumes entire star systems won't stop at Federation borders. My thoughts exactly. I'm recommending we accept their request, but on our terms. We send a volunteer force with our equipment and our tactics. Who did you have in mind to lead it? Murphy looked across the room at Harrison. Colonel, are you interested in taking your people to fight aliens? Harrison didn't hesitate. Yes, General. My troops signed up to protect humanity. Doesn't matter if the threat comes from Earth or somewhere else. It won't be easy, Murphy warned. The Federation considers us primitive. They'll expect us to follow their battle plans and use their tactics. Tactics that have been failing for 18 months. Then we'll have to show them how Earth fights wars, Harrison replied. We adapt or we die. It's been that way for our entire species. Rodriguez stood up from her chair. General, I volunteer Alpha Company for this mission. My people have experience in environments that would kill most humans. If these aliens think their war zones are hostile, they haven't seen anything yet. Sergeant Tony Blake, who had been quiet during the briefing, finally spoke up. Ma'am, with respect, what kind of support are we talking about? The Federation may have better technology, but I'd rather trust equipment I know will work when things get bad. That's a good point, Sergeant. Admiral Chen, what's the status on our new kinetic weapons? Chen's image smiled grimly. The railgun. Systems are ready for field testing. The Federation might not approve of our methods, but they can't argue with results. Murphy made her decision. Colonel Harrison, you'll have operational command of the Expeditionary Force. Captain Rodriguez, your Alpha Company, will handle special operations. Sergeant Blake, I want your engineering teams to adapt our equipment for space warfare. She paused, looking around the room at the faces of soldiers who had spent their entire careers fighting on a world that tried to kill them every day. Gentlemen, ladies, we're about to show the galaxy what happens when you ask a death world for help. The Federation wants reinforcements. They're going to get something they never expected. Harrison saluted. How long do we have to prepare, General? 48 hours. The Federation is providing transport ships and basic life support equipment. Everything else comes from Earth. As the meeting broke up, Murphy remained behind with Admiral Chen's projection. Pat, are we making a mistake? 2,000 soldiers against an enemy that's consumed 3 star systems? Maybe, Chen admitted. But Earth has been preparing for interstellar war since we developed faster-than-light travel. If we can't handle one alien species, we don't deserve to survive out here. The projection faded, leaving Murphy alone with her thoughts. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, she could see the red surface of Mars stretching to the horizon. Humanity had turned a dead world into a thriving military installation. Now they would find out if the skills learned on Earth's hostile surface could translate to war among the stars. In 2 days, the galaxy would learn what kind of soldiers a death world produced. The human transport ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. and Colonel Jake Harrison felt his stomach clench at what he saw through the viewports. The Federation stronghold world hung in space like a wounded animal, its surface scarred by impact craters and burning cities. Orbital defense platforms drifted as dead metal, their hulls cracked open and bleeding atmosphere into the void. But it was the enemy that made Harrison's blood run cold. The Vexi swarm surrounded the planet in a living cloud of bioships that pulsed with organic light. The vessels looked like massive insects crossed with diseased organs, their surfaces rippling with movement that suggested things crawling beneath the skin. Some were small as fighter craft, others stretched for kilometers, all of them moving with a coordination that spoke of a single controlling intelligence. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Ben Carter from his position at the tactical display. "How many of them are there?" "Computer estimates between 50 and 60,000 individual vessels," reported the ship's navigation officer, her voice tight with controlled fear. "That's just what we can see on sensors. There could be twice that number hiding in the planet's shadow." Captain Amy Rodriguez joined Harrison at the main viewport, her face grim as she studied the enemy formation. "They're not moving like ships, Colonel. Look at the way they pulse and shift. It's like watching a single organism." "That's because they are," came a new voice from behind them. The humans turned to see Admiral Cathvar approaching, his scaled skin showing the deep blue patterns that indicated stress among his species. The Vexi operate as a collective consciousness. Each ship is more like a limb or organ than an independent unit. Harrison studied the alien admiral with professional interest. The Federation officer looked exhausted, his uniform stained and his movements showing the weight of months of continuous defeat. "Admiral, we need a full tactical briefing. My people fight best when they understand their enemy." Cathvar's skin shifted to lighter shades. What Harrison had learned indicated surprise. "Colonel, with respect, your force is very small. We had hoped for at least 50,000 troops. How do you expect 2,000 soldiers to make any difference against an enemy of this magnitude?" "That depends on how we use them," Harrison replied. "But first I need to understand why your people have been losing this war." The briefing room aboard the Federation flagship was crowded with officers from a dozen different species. Harrison, Rodriguez, and Carter sat across from Cathvar and his senior staff, while holographic displays showed the progress of the war over the past 18 months. "The Vexi appeared here, at the Galactic Rim," explained Commander Zethli, her tentacles dancing over the control surface. "They struck without warning, consuming everything in their path. We've tried every conventional tactic: energy weapons, kinetic bombardment, focused shield penetration. Nothing stops them." Rodriguez leaned forward, studying the battle footage. "Show me how they fight on the ground." The display shifted to show Federation troops engaging Vexi ground forces on a contested planet. The aliens moved like a living carpet across the battlefield. Individual creatures the size of men but built like armored insects. They swarmed over Federation positions, accepting massive casualties to overwhelm defensive lines. "They don't seem to feel pain," noted Commander Telnara. "Or fear. We've seen individual Vexi continue attacking even after losing limbs or suffering wounds that would incapacitate any civilized being." Carter watched the footage with growing interest. "What about their command structure? How do they coordinate attacks?" "That's the problem," Cathvar admitted. "They don't have commanders in any sense we understand. The entire swarm operates as a single entity. Kill 1,000 of them, and the rest adapt instantly to your tactics. There's no way to disrupt their chain of command because they don't have one." Harrison absorbed this information while watching the battle footage. The Federation forces fought with precision and discipline, their energy weapons cutting down waves of Vexi attackers. But for every alien that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. The human colonel began to understand why the Federation was losing. "Admiral, your troops pull back when casualties reach 10%, he observed. "Of course. No military force can sustain higher losses and remain effective. The Vexi don't pull back at all. No, they fight until every last one is dead." Harrison exchanged glances with Rodriguez and Carter. All 3 humans wore the same grim expression. "Admiral, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer," Harrison said. How far are you willing to go to win this war? Kethavar's skin pattern shifted to confusion. I don't understand the question, Colonel. Your people fight like this is a civilized conflict. Rules of engagement, acceptable casualty rates, clean, tactical solutions. But you're not fighting a civilized enemy. The Vexhai don't care about your rules. They'll use any method, accept any loss, inflict any horror to achieve victory. The Federation officers looked uncomfortable. Commander Zeth-Lai spoke up first. Colonel, the Federation has treaties and conventions that govern warfare. We can't simply abandon centuries of military ethics. Rodriguez's voice was cold when she responded. Those treaties won't matter much when the swarm is eating your homeworlds. Captain Rodriguez is right, Harrison continued. You've been trying to fight monsters while following the rules that monsters don't recognize. That's why you're losing. Kethavar leaned back in his chair, his skin cycling through several color patterns that indicated deep thought. What are you suggesting, Colonel? I'm suggesting you let us show you how humans fight wars, Harrison replied. We don't have the luxury of fighting clean. Where we come from, losing means extinction. So we learn to do whatever it takes to survive. The room fell silent. The Federation officers looked at each other with expressions that mixed hope and horror. What exactly does that mean? Asked Commander Telnara. Carter pulled up Earth's military history on his personal display. It means we use every advantage we can get. We target their weaknesses, exploit their psychology, turn their own nature against them. We make the cost of fighting us so high that even winning becomes a form of losing. And if that means abandoning the conventional rules of warfare? Kethavar asked quietly. Harrison met the alien admiral's gaze without flinching. Admiral, my species spent millions of years learning to survive on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We didn't become civilized because we were naturally peaceful. We became civilized because we were so good at violence that we scared ourselves. Rodriguez stood up from her chair and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Vexhai swarm surrounding the planet. The question isn't whether we're willing to fight dirty, Admiral. The question is whether you're ready to see what happens when Earth goes to war. Outside the window, the bioships pulsed with alien malevolence, their organic hulls rippling, with anticipation of the slaughter to come. They had consumed 3 star systems and broken the military might of the Galactic Federation, but they had never faced creatures forged in the hell of Earth's hostile surface. They were about to learn what the rest of the galaxy meant when they called humans Deathworlders. Captain Amy Rodriguez crouched in the ruins of what had been a Federation research station, her helmet display showing toxic atmosphere readings that would kill most alien species in minutes. The air burned with acids released by Vexhai bioweapons, and the temperature hovered near the boiling point of water. For a human who had fought in the volcanic zones of Indonesia, it was just another Tuesday. Contact ahead, whispered Sergeant Danny Walsh through the comm system. 3 Vexhai scouts moving through the wreckage at grid reference 47 Alpha. Rodriguez signaled her team to spread out. Alpha Company had been on the surface for 6 hours, conducting what the Federation called reconnaissance and what humans called hunting. The Federation observers monitoring from orbit had already expressed concern about operating in such hostile conditions. Remember, we want one alive, Rodriguez told her team. Intelligence needs to understand how these things think. The Vexhai scouts moved through the ruins like living nightmares. Each creature stood 8 feet tall with armored carapaces that gleamed with organic slime. Their multiple eyes swept the area with predatory intelligence, while razor-sharp limbs carved through twisted metal as if it were paper. They communicated through clicking sounds that made Rodriguez's skin crawl. Private Joey Martinez, positioned on the squad's left flank, opened fire first. His kinetic rifle sent explosive rounds into the nearest Vexhai, tearing chunks from its armor. The creature screamed, a sound like tearing metal, but instead of falling, it charged straight at Martinez's position. This was where the difference between human and Federation tactics became clear. Instead of falling back or calling for support, Martinez held his ground and switched to his backup weapon. The flamethrower engulfed the wounded Vexhai in chemical fire that burned even in the poisonous atmosphere. The remaining 2 Vexhai split up, trying to flank the human position. Rodriguez smiled grimly inside her helmet. The creatures were following standard pack hunting behavior. Exactly what Lieutenant Carter's intelligence reports had predicted. "Walsh, take the one heading east. I've got the other one," she ordered. Rodriguez moved through the ruins with practiced stealth, using cover that would provide no protection against energy weapons, but worked perfectly against creatures that hunted by sight and smell. The Vexi was larger than its companions, probably a pack leader, with additional sensory organs that twitched as it searched for human scent. The creature rounded a collapsed wall and found Rodriguez waiting for it. She put 3 rounds center, mass watching the explosive shells crack its armor. The Vexi stumbled but kept coming, its claws reaching for her throat. Rodriguez didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped inside the creature's reach and activated the combat knife mounted on her rifle. The blade was coated with a toxin derived from Earth's most venomous snakes, modified by human chemists to affect alien biology. The Vexhi's scream changed pitch as the poison entered its system. Rodriguez rolled away as the creature collapsed, its nervous system shutting down but still very much alive. "Perfect for interrogation. Target secured," she reported. "Walsh, what's your status?" "Got mine," came the reply. "Use the new explosive rounds, there's not much left to study." Rodriguez looked at her prisoner as it writhed on the ground, unable to move but clearly aware. Its multiple eyes tracked her movements with what looked like fear. She had never seen a Vexi show fear before. "Command, this is Alpha Leader. We have a live capture requesting immediate extraction." Admiral Kethvar's voice crackled through the comm system, transmitted from the flagship orbiting above. "Captain Rodriguez, our xenobiologists are very interested in examining your prisoner. However, I must ask about your methods. Our sensors detected chemical weapons and extreme temperature weapons being used. Standard Earth equipment, Admiral. Nothing your people haven't seen before. Captain, our forces have never operated in atmospheric conditions that would melt most Federation equipment. How are your people surviving down there?" Rodriguez looked around at her team. Martinez was cleaning Vexi blood from his flamethrower, while joking with Private Sarah Kim about the quality of alien barbecue. Kim was taking atmospheric samples that would require a hazmat team to handle safely back on most Federation worlds. "We're from Earth, Admiral. This isn't even close to the worst environment we've fought in." The extraction went smoothly, with human shuttles designed to operate in conditions that would ground most Federation aircraft. Within an hour, Rodriguez and her team were back aboard the command ship with their prisoner secured in a containment cell. Colonel Harrison met them in the hangar bay, his expression showing satisfaction with the mission's success. "Good work, Amy. The Federation science teams are amazed that you managed to capture a live specimen." "It wasn't that difficult, sir. These creatures are built for overwhelming weaker enemies, not for fighting opponents who know how to hurt them." They walked through the ship's corridors toward the briefing room, passing Federation officers who stared at the humans with mixtures of respect and unease. Word had spread quickly through the fleet about the surface mission's success. The real breakthrough came from Lieutenant Carter's intelligence analysis, Rodriguez continued. He figured out that the Vexi hunt in packs with predictable behavior patterns. Once we knew how they thought, it was just a matter of turning their instincts against them. In the briefing room, Carter was presenting his findings to a mixed group of human and Federation officers. The live Vexi specimen sat in a transparent containment unit, its movement sluggish from the human-designed sedatives. "The creature's nervous system is more complex than we initially thought," Carter explained. "But it has a critical weakness. The Vexi collective consciousness depends on constant chemical communication between individuals. Disrupt that communication, and they become confused and disoriented." Commander Zethali studied the prisoner with obvious fascination. "How did you discover this?" "We poisoned it," Rodriguez said simply. "The toxin we use doesn't just paralyze the creature. It blocks the chemical receptors that allow it to connect with the swarm." The Federation officers looked uncomfortable. "Captain, using biological weapons is forbidden under Galactic Convention," protested Commander Telnara. "It's not a biological weapon," Carter corrected. "It's a neurotoxin derived from earth snake venom, completely natural." "That makes it worse, not better," Telnara replied. Harrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of decades. of combat experience. Commander, my people have been fighting with every available weapon for our entire evolutionary history. We use toxins, fire, explosives, environmental hazards, psychological warfare, and anything else that gives us an advantage. That's how we survived long enough to develop space travel. Admiral Kethvar had been studying the tactical reports from the surface mission. Colonel, your forces took 0 casualties while operating in conditions that would kill most of my people. How is this possible? Training and equipment, Admiral, but mostly mindset. My soldiers expect to fight in hostile environments against enemies that want to kill them. Your people fight expecting to survive. And that makes a difference? Rodriguez looked at the captured Vex-High, which was staring back at her with what she now recognized as terror. Admiral, that creature down there has probably never experienced fear before today. The swarm has been winning this war because they thought they were the most dangerous things in the galaxy. She turned to face the Federation officers, her expression hard. They just learned they were wrong. Through the viewports, the Vex-High fleet continued its siege of the planet below. But for the first time since the war began, individual bioships could be seen pulling back from areas where human forces operated. The swarm was learning to be afraid, and fear, as any human soldier knew, was the first step toward defeat. The Vex-High swarm had never retreated before. In 18 months of warfare, they had pressed forward through every defensive line, consumed every obstacle, and overwhelmed every Federation force that stood against them. But now, as Sergeant Tony Blake watched through his scope, entire formations of bioships were pulling back from the planet's northern continent. Command, this is Demolition Team 7, Blake reported into his headset. The swarm is evacuating, Sector 12. Repeat, they're running away. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled through the comm system from his position aboard the orbital command station. Confirmed, Sergeant. We're seeing the same pattern across all human operational zones. The enemy is avoiding direct contact with our forces. Blake grinned as he watched the massive bioships retreat into higher orbit. His team had spent the last week teaching the Vex-High that human engineers could turn any environment into a weapon. Explosive charges hidden in the ruins of Federation cities. Chemical traps that released toxins into the air when triggered. Psychological warfare broadcasts that drove individual Vex-High into panic states. Sir, request permission to pursue the retreating forces, Blake said. Negative, Sergeant. We stick to the plan. Let them come to us. The plan was something that would have horrified the Federation if they had understood it completely. While Admiral Kethvar and his officers believed the humans were simply conducting advanced reconnaissance missions, the reality was far more disturbing. Colonel Harrison had turned the war into a learning laboratory, using each engagement to study Vex-High psychology and develop new methods of terror. Lieutenant Ben Carter emerged from his mobile command post, his face showing the satisfaction of a predator who had found the perfect hunting ground. His intelligence unit had been analyzing Vex-High communication patterns for 2 weeks, and the results were better than anyone had hoped. Blake, you need to see this, Carter said, activating his portable display. We've cracked their chemical communication system. The swarm isn't just avoiding us, they're terrified of us. The display showed intercepted biosignals from the retreating Vex-High forces. To human eyes, the patterns looked like random noise, but Carter's team had learned to read the alien equivalent of radio chatter. This cluster here represents what we think is distress, Carter explained, pointing to a section of the data. It's being broadcast by every Vex-High unit that has encountered human forces. But here's the interesting part. The signal is getting stronger, not weaker. Blake studied the information with growing understanding. They're not just afraid of us. They're becoming more afraid the longer they're exposed to us. Exactly. Human tactics are causing cumulative psychological damage to the collective consciousness. Each encounter makes the entire swarm more reluctant to engage. Captain Rodriguez joined them, her armor still stained with the acidic blood of Vex-High she had killed in the morning's raid. Her team had been testing new weapons designed specifically to cause maximum terror among the alien forces. Carter, what's the status on the fear response experiments? She asked. Better than expected, Captain. The sonic weapons are particularly effective. Humans can barely hear the frequencies we're using, but they cause severe disorientation in VXI neural systems. Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. The sonic weapons had been developed from recordings of human screams modified to trigger panic responses in alien psychology. The Federation scientists had been horrified when they learned what the sounds actually were. Blake, how are your new explosive compounds working out? The demolitions expert's expression turned predatory. The chemical reactions are beautiful, Captain. We're not just killing them. We're making them suffer in ways their species has never experienced before. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from orbit. Admiral Kethvar's voice carried a note of panic that was becoming increasingly common among Federation officers. All human units, we have a situation developing in the outer system. A massive VXI fleet has just entered sensor range. Initial estimates suggest over 200,000 bioships. Blake whistled softly. The approaching fleet was larger than anything the Federation had faced before. Sir, that's more than enough to overwhelm our entire defense force. Not necessarily, Carter said, studying his intelligence data. Look at their formation patterns. They're not advancing aggressively. The fleet is hanging back at maximum sensor range. Rodriguez activated her communicator. Admiral, this is Captain Rodriguez. What's the swarm's current posture? They appear to be waiting, Captain. Our tactical computers can't determine their intentions. They're scared, Rodriguez said simply. The local swarm units have been broadcasting fear signals to the main fleet. They're warning the others about us. Harrison's voice joined the conversation from his command position. All units prepare for Operation Nightmare. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a Death World species. The operation had been designed based on human understanding of psychological warfare. Instead of trying to fight 200,000 bioships directly, the humans would demonstrate why the VXI should be afraid. Blake and his demolitions team had spent weeks preparing the planet's surface for this moment. Hidden throughout the ruins were charges designed not just to kill, but to create spectacular displays of destruction that would be visible from orbit. Chemical weapons that would paint the sky with colors that triggered instinctive terror responses in VXI psychology. Demolitions teams begin Phase 1, Harrison ordered. Across the planet's surface, human-designed explosions began lighting up the night. But these weren't random detonations. Each blast was carefully coordinated to create patterns that the VXI collective consciousness would interpret as deliberate communication. Carter monitored the enemy's response through intercepted biosignals. Sir, the fear responses are spiking. The local swarm is transmitting massive distress signals to the approaching fleet. Phase 2, Harrison commanded. Rodriguez's special operations teams activated the sonic weapons, broadcasting modified human battle cries across frequencies that penetrated deep into VXI neural systems. The sounds carried across the planet's atmosphere and into space, where the waiting bioships received them as a promise of horrors to come. Blake triggered the chemical dispersal systems next. Clouds of toxic compounds spread across the planet's surface, creating atmospheric disturbances that spelled out messages in the VXI's own chemical language. The messages were simple and terrifying. We know how to hurt you. We know how to make you suffer. We are coming for you. Admiral, what's the enemy fleet doing now? Harrison asked. Kethavar's voice was filled with disbelief. Colonel, they're retreating. 200,000 ships, and they're running away without firing a single shot. Through his scope, Blake watched the distant bioships turning away from the planet. The massive fleet that should have overwhelmed the defenders was fleeing into deep space, carrying with them the knowledge that humanity had joined the war. Rodriguez keyed her communicator to broadcast on all Federation frequencies. Admiral, please inform the Galactic Council that Earth has a message for the VXI swarm. What message, Captain? Rodriguez looked out at the stars where the alien fleet was disappearing into the darkness. Tell them that humans don't just fight wars. We teach our enemies to be afraid of the dark. The VXI swarm had spent millions of years as the galaxy's most feared predators. They had consumed worlds and broken the will of countless species. But they had never encountered creatures that could turn fear itself into a weapon. Now they understood why the Federation called Earth a death world. It wasn't because of the planet's hostile environment. It was because of what that environment had created, a species that could make nightmares into reality. The final battle began not with the thunder of weapons, but with silence. The Vex-High home system hung in space like a diseased heart, its 3 suns casting sickly light across bioships that stretched beyond counting. At the center of it all lay the Prime Hive, a massive organic structure the size of a small moon where the swarm's collective consciousness made its home. General Lisa Murphy stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching the enemy fleet through reinforced viewports. 6 months of warfare had brought them to this moment. The Federation fleet floated behind them, thousands of ships carrying the combined military might of 50 species. But everyone knew the real assault would come from the 2,000 humans who had turned a losing war into something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Kethavar, what's the status of your forces? Murphy asked through the comm system. The alien admiral's voice carried exhaustion and something that might have been awe. General, our fleets are in position, but I must ask again. Are you certain about this plan? The Prime Hive contains billions of Vex-High. Even if your tactics work, the losses will be enormous. Murphy looked around at her command staff. Colonel Harrison stood at the tactical display, his scarred face showing the calm that came before battle. Captain Rodriguez checked her equipment, one last time, preparing to lead the assault on the Hive's core. Sergeant Blake was reviewing the specifications for weapons that would have been considered war crimes on any civilized world. Admiral, my people didn't come this far to turn back now, Murphy replied. Besides, we're not planning to fight billions of Vex-High, we're planning to break their will to fight. The plan was ambitious even by human standards. While the Federation fleet engaged the outer defenses, human forces would penetrate the Prime Hive and plant psychological warfare devices directly into the collective consciousness. If it worked, the entire swarm would experience something their species had never known: complete terror. All units commence Operation Deathworld, Murphy ordered. The Federation fleet moved first, their energy weapons carving through the outer ring of bioships with precision that had taken centuries to perfect. But this was just the opening move. The real attack would come from directions the Vex-High couldn't predict. Harrison led the first wave of human assault craft toward the Prime Hive. The ships were painted black and configured to run silent, using stealth technology that worked, not by hiding from sensors, but by making the vessels appear to be something else entirely. To Vex-High perception, the approaching human fleet looked like chunks of space debris drifting toward the Hive. Remember, we're not here to destroy the Hive, Harrison told his forces over the comm system. We're here to teach it fear. Rodriguez's team was first through the Hive's outer shell, cutting their way into organic corridors that pulsed with alien life. The interior of the structure was a nightmare of living walls and breathing floors, but the humans moved through it like they belonged there. Earth had prepared them for environments that most species couldn't even imagine. The Vex-High defenders, inside the Hive, fought with desperate fury, but they were facing enemies who had learned to turn the Hive's own biology against it. Blake's explosive charges weren't just designed to destroy. They released chemical compounds that would spread through the Hive's circulatory system, carrying human-designed toxins directly to the collective consciousness. Blake, what's your status? Rodriguez asked as her team fought through a chamber, filled with Vex-High that looked like living nightmares. Charges are set, Captain. These compounds are going to make the entire Hive experience what humans call a panic attack, on a planetary scale. Lieutenant Carter's intelligence team had reached their objective, the Hive's central communication node. The structure looked like a massive brain made of insects, its surface crawling with synaptic activity that controlled the entire swarm. Sir, we're in position, Carter reported, beginning psychological warfare insertion. The devices Carter's team planted were masterpieces of human psychological warfare. They would broadcast directly into the collective consciousness, flooding it with every fear that humans had learned to weaponize. The sound of human laughter mixed with screams, images of Earth's most hostile environments, chemical signals that would trigger every terror response the Vex-High possessed. But the most effective weapon was something simpler: recordings of human children playing. To a species that existed only as a collective, The sound of individual minds developing independently was more horrifying than any weapon. Outside the hive, the battle raged as Federation forces engaged millions of bioships. But aboard the human flagship, Murphy watched something unprecedented happening on the tactical display. Individual Vex-High vessels were breaking formation, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. "General, we're receiving reports from across the enemy fleet," reported her communications officer. "The Vex-High are fighting each other. Some ships are attacking their own forces." Murphy smiled grimly. The psychological warfare was working, better than they had hoped. The collective consciousness was breaking down, fragmenting into individual minds that had never learned to exist alone. "Admiral Kethvar, do you see what's happening to their fleet?" Murphy asked. The alien admiral's voice was filled with disbelief. "General, this is impossible. The Vex-High don't have individual minds. They can't exist as separate entities. They do now. My people just taught them how to be individuals. And the first thing they're learning is how to be afraid." Inside the hive, Rodriguez's team reached their final objective, the core of the collective consciousness itself. The chamber was vast, filled with organic structures that throbbed with the mental activity of billions of Vex-High. At the center sat something that looked like a massive insect queen, but Rodriguez knew it was something far more important, the living embodiment of the swarm's shared mind. "Blake, are you ready?" she asked. The demolitions expert held a device that contained every psychological weapon humans had developed. "Yes, ma'am. This one's special. It's going to show them what real nightmares look like." The device activated, flooding the collective consciousness with the concentrated essence of human warfare. Every fear, every horror, every terror that Earth's hostile environment had taught humanity to overcome became part of the Vex-High shared experience. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Hive Queen's scream echoed through dimensions that humans couldn't perceive, carrying with it the death cry of a collective consciousness that was tearing itself apart. Across the galaxy, every Vex-High felt the terror flooding through their shared mind. The war ended not with a final battle, but with silence. The Vex-High fleet simply stopped fighting. Individual bioships drifted aimlessly through space, their crews struggling to understand concepts like loneliness and individual thought. The swarm that had conquered 3 star systems was reduced to confused fragments, each one experiencing the horror of existing alone. Admiral Kethvar's voice broke the silence on the command frequency. "General Murphy, sensors show the entire Vex-High fleet is powering down. They're not responding to any communication attempts." Murphy looked out at the field of drifting bioships. "They're not dead, Admiral. They're just learning to be afraid. It might take them a few thousand years to recover from what we've taught them." Colonel Harrison's voice came through from inside the hive. "General, mission complete. The collective consciousness has fragmented. Whatever the Vex-High were before, this moment, they're not anymore. The Federation had asked Earth for reinforcements to help them fight a war they were losing. What they got was a lesson in why some species were called Death Worlders. Humans hadn't just won the war. They had fundamentally changed what it meant to be Vex-High." As the human forces prepared to return home, Murphy received a transmission from the Galactic Council. They wanted to establish a permanent military alliance with Earth, with humans serving as the Federation's specialists in unconventional warfare. Murphy considered the offer while watching the broken remains of the Vex-High fleet drift through space. The galaxy was safer now, but it was also a little darker. Humanity had shown the civilized species that sometimes survival required becoming something that civilized minds preferred not to acknowledge. The Death Worlders had come when called. They had done what needed to be done. And the galaxy would never forget the price of asking Earth for help.